Why do the best people suffer the most? Why does life seem unfair to those who are kind? Why do good people face the hardest battles while the ruthless thrive? These are the questions that have haunted the minds of many for centuries. If you have ever felt that life is unkind to you despite your goodness, if you have ever wondered why your kindness is repaid with betrayal, or why your struggles seem never-ending while others who lack integrity rise with ease, then stay with me. By the end of this speech, you will see suffering in a new light. You will understand its hidden truth. You will realize why your pain is not a curse but a path to something greater. To understand suffering, we must first understand the nature of goodness. What does it mean to be a good person? A good person is not simply someone who follows the rules, who avoids wrongdoing, or who seeks approval. A good person carries a weight within them, a deep sense of responsibility, empathy, and moral integrity. They choose honesty when deception would be easier. They choose kindness when anger would be justified. They choose to help others even when they themselves are struggling. But the world does not always reward these choices. Carl Jung once said, "No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." What does this mean? It means that suffering is the birthplace of growth. Good people suffer because they feel deeply. They experience emotions more intensely. They see the pain of others, and they carry the burdens that most people ignore. The world is not designed to protect the gentle-hearted, it challenges them. And this challenge is not a punishment but a test, an invitation to become stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Look at history. The greatest minds, the most compassionate leaders, the most influential figures in human history all suffered immensely. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, lost his entire family in concentration camps, yet emerged with a profound understanding of the human spirit. Mother Teresa devoted her life to serving the poorest of the poor, witnessing unimaginable suffering every day. Why? Why do the best among us endure the most hardship? Because suffering refines the soul. It strips away illusions and forces us to confront who we really are. It is only through fire that gold is purified. There is a harsh truth that many fail to realize. The world does not operate on fairness. It is not a balanced equation where good actions immediately lead to good outcomes. This can be painful to accept. Many people believe that if they do good, they should receive good in return. But reality does not work this way. The universe is not transactional. Sometimes the kindest hearts are the ones most betrayed. Sometimes the most honest people face the most rejection. But this does not mean that goodness is worthless. It means that true goodness is not dependent on reward. It is valuable in itself. Imagine two roads. One is smooth, effortless, and free of obstacles. The other is steep, rocky, and filled with challenges. Which road do you think leads to greatness? Easy lives do not produce strong people. Adversity is the forge of character. When life is easy, we remain stagnant. When life is difficult, we evolve. Good people are placed on the hardest paths because they are capable of walking them. Their suffering is not a sign of weakness but of potential. Many times, good people suffer because they expect others to be like them. They assume that because they would never betray, others will not betray them. They believe that because they are honest, others will be honest too. But this is a dangerous illusion. Not everyone sees the world as you do. Not everyone carries the same moral compass. Some people will take advantage of kindness. Some will exploit your goodwill. And if you do not set boundaries, you will find yourself drained, exhausted, and questioning your own worth. So what can you do? How do you navigate a world that does not always reward kindness? First, you must accept that suffering is not a punishment. It is a teacher. Every hardship carries a lesson. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What is this teaching me?" Second, set boundaries. Being good does not mean being a doormat. It does not mean allowing yourself to be used. True kindness includes strength. It means knowing when to walk away. It means recognizing when your energy is being drained and protecting yourself from those who only take but never give. Third, understand that your suffering has meaning. Nietzsche once said, He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. Find your why. Use your pain to fuel your purpose. Every great story has conflict. Every hero faces trials. You are no different. Your struggles are shaping you into the person you are meant to become. And lastly, remember this: goodness is not weakness. Compassion is not a flaw. The world may not always recognize your value immediately, but your worth is not measured by how others treat you. It is measured by the strength of your character, the resilience of your spirit, and the depth of your heart. So the next time you feel that life is unfair, that your kindness is being repaid with suffering, that the world does not see your worth, remember this: the strongest souls are forged in fire. The kindest hearts have endured the deepest wounds. And the people who suffer the most are often the ones who leave the greatest impact on this world. Asterisk. You are not suffering because you are weak. You are suffering because you are strong enough to endure it. And one day, you will look back and see that every hardship, every betrayal, and every painful moment was leading you to something greater. Until then, keep walking, keep believing, keep being the good person that this world so desperately needs. The road ahead is not paved with ease, nor should it be, for it is in the struggle, in the relentless pursuit of truth and goodness, that we find our true selves. You may have noticed that the world often seems to reward those who are cunning, ruthless, and self-serving, while those who embody unwavering honesty and boundless compassion are met with resistance, ridicule, and even betrayal. Why is this? Why does sincerity invite mockery rather than respect? Why does goodness so often seem to be a disadvantage in a world that claims to value virtue? Consider the story of Dostoevsky's The Idiot, where Prince Mishkin, a man of pure heart and unshakable integrity, is met not with admiration but with manipulation and scorn. His goodness is seen as naivety, his compassion as weakness. Society, unable to comprehend his moral clarity, breaks him. But this is not just a tale from 19th century Russia. It is a mirror held up to our world today. It reflects a painful truth about human nature, that goodness, when it is pure and unyielding, often disrupts the status quo. It challenges the comfortable lies we tell ourselves, and for that, it is met with resistance. But here is the question we must ask. If being good leads to suffering, why be good at all? Why choose kindness when it is so often repaid with cruelty? Why choose honesty when deceit seems to yield greater rewards? The answer lies not in the immediate outcomes of our actions but in the deeper, more profound truth about what it means to be human. Goodness is not a transaction. It is not a currency to be exchanged for praise, success, or comfort. It is a choice, a radical, defiant act of faith in the potential of humanity. When you choose to be good, you are not choosing an easy path. You are choosing a path that demands courage, resilience, and an unshakable belief in something greater than yourself. You are choosing to live in alignment with your values, even when the world seems to reward the opposite. And yet, this does not mean that goodness is futile. On the contrary, it is the most powerful force in the world. It is the force that has driven every great movement, every act of justice, every moment of profound change. Think of the civil rights leaders who faced violence and hatred with unwavering love. Think of the activists who risk everything to fight for a better world. Think of the countless unsung heroes who, in their quiet acts of kindness, keep the light of hope alive in the darkest of times. Goodness is not weak. It is not passive. It is a fire that burns away the illusions of power, wealth, and status, revealing what truly matters: connection, compassion, and the shared humanity that binds us all. But to walk this path, you must be prepared. You must arm yourself not with bitterness or cynicism, but with wisdom and strength. You must learn to discern between those who deserve your kindness and those who would exploit it. You must set boundaries not out of fear, but out of self-respect. And you must remember that your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by the integrity with which you live your life. There will be moments when the weight of the world feels unbearable, when the injustice of it all threatens to break you. In those moments, remember this: your suffering is not a sign of failure. It is a testament to your courage. It is proof that you have chosen the harder, nobler path. And while the world may not always recognize your value, your impact is felt in ways you may never fully see. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, ripples out into the world. Every moment of honesty, every act of compassion, every refusal to compromise your values. These are the threads that weave the fabric of a better world. You may not always see the results, but trust that they are there. So, when you feel the weight of your struggles, when you wonder if your goodness is worth the pain, remember this: the world does not need more people who succeed at the expense of their integrity. It needs more people who are willing to stand firm in their values, even when it costs them everything. It needs more people who are willing to suffer for what is right, because they understand that true strength lies not in domination but in love. And as you walk this path, know that you are not alone. You are part of a long lineage of those who have chosen goodness over ease, truth over comfort, love over fear. Their stories are your stories, their struggles your struggles, their triumphs your triumphs. The road ahead is not easy, but it is worth it. For in the end, it is not the wealth we accumulate, the power we wield, or the recognition we receive that defines us. It is the depth of our compassion, the strength of our character, and the light we bring to the world. So keep walking, keep believing, keep being the good that this world so desperately needs. And know that, no matter how dark the night may seem, the dawn is always waiting. This is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of something even greater. To truly understand the relationship between suffering and goodness, we must move beyond motivational rhetoric and delve into the philosophical underpinnings of this paradox. Why does suffering so often accompany goodness? Is it a mere coincidence, a flaw in the design of existence, or is there a deeper, more intrinsic connection between the two? To explore this, we must examine the nature of suffering, the essence of goodness, and the interplay between them in the human experience. Suffering, in its most fundamental form, is an encounter with resistance. It arises when our desires, expectations, or values clash with the reality of the world. For the good person, this resistance is amplified. Why? Because the good person operates from a place of moral integrity, empathy, and a commitment to principles that often run counter to the self-serving tendencies of human nature. From a philosophical standpoint, suffering can be seen as a confrontation with the absurd, a term famously explored by Albert Camus. The absurd is the tension between our human desire for meaning and the universe's apparent indifference to that desire. The good person, by virtue of their commitment to values like justice, compassion, and truth, is more acutely aware of this tension. They see the gap between how the world is and how it ought to be, and this awareness is a source of profound suffering. But is this suffering meaningless, or does it serve a purpose? To answer this, we must turn to the existentialists, who argue that suffering is not merely a passive experience but an active engagement with the conditions of existence. Jean-Paul Sartre, for instance, posited that suffering is a byproduct of our freedom, the freedom to choose, to act, and to define ourselves. For the good person, this freedom is both a burden and a gift. It is a burden because it demands that they take responsibility for their choices, even when those choices lead to hardship. It is a gift because it allows them to affirm their values in the face of adversity. Goodness, as a philosophical concept, is not merely the absence of evil or the adherence to societal norms. It is an active, intentional orientation toward the well-being of others and the pursuit of moral excellence. Aristotle, in his Nicomachean Ethics, described goodness as the cultivation of virtue, a habit of character that enables one to live in accordance with reason and moral duty. But here lies the crux of the matter. Goodness, by its very nature, requires sacrifice. To be good is to prioritize the needs of others, to act with integrity even when it is inconvenient, and to uphold principles even when they are unpopular. This sacrificial aspect of goodness inevitably leads to suffering, for it places the good person in direct opposition to the forces of selfishness, apathy, and injustice that pervade the world. Immanuel Kant, in his deontological ethics, argued that moral actions are those performed out of duty, regardless of their consequences. For Kant, the good person is one who acts according to the categorical imperative, a universal moral law that transcends personal gain or comfort. This framework helps us understand why goodness often leads to suffering. The good person is bound by duty, even when fulfilling that duty comes at great personal cost. If suffering is an encounter with resistance, and goodness is a commitment to moral duty, then the interplay between the two can be understood as a dialectic, a dynamic tension that drives personal and collective growth. Hegelian philosophy offers a useful lens here. Hegel argued that progress arises from the resolution of contradictions. In this case, the contradiction is between the individual's moral ideals and the imperfect reality of the world. The good person, by embodying these ideals, becomes a catalyst for change. Their suffering is not in vain. It is the friction that generates the spark of transformation. Consider the example of Socrates, who drank hemlock rather than renounce his philosophical principles. His death was a profound personal tragedy, but it also became a symbol of intellectual and moral courage, inspiring countless others to question, to think, and to live with integrity. Similarly, the suffering of figures like Nelson Mandela, Viktor Frankl, and Mother Teresa was not an end in itself but a means to a greater end. Their pain was the price they paid for their commitment to justice, meaning, and love. In this sense, suffering is not merely a byproduct of goodness but an integral part of its expression. At the heart of this discussion lies a paradox. If goodness leads to suffering, and suffering refines goodness, then the two are inextricably linked. This paradox challenges us to reconsider our understanding of both concepts. Suffering is not merely a punishment or a test. It is a crucible in which the soul is forged. Goodness is not merely a virtue. It is a radical act of defiance against the forces of indifference and injustice. Friedrich Nietzsche, in his exploration of suffering, argued that it is through adversity that we discover our true potential. His concept of amor fati, the love of fate, encourages us to embrace suffering as an essential part of life. For Nietzsche, the good person is not one who avoids suffering but one who transforms it into a source of strength and creativity. This perspective invites us to see suffering not as an obstacle to goodness but as its companion. The good person does not seek suffering, but neither do they flee from it. They accept it as part of the human condition and use it as a tool for growth and transformation. In the end, the philosophical analysis of suffering and goodness reveals a profound truth. Suffering is not the antithesis of goodness but its ally. It is through suffering that the good person is tested, refined, and ultimately transformed. The world may not always reward goodness, but this does not diminish its value. On the contrary, it underscores the courage and resilience required to live a life of integrity. So, when you find yourself questioning the fairness of life, when you wonder why your kindness is met with cruelty or your honesty with betrayal, remember this: your suffering is not a sign of failure. It is a testament to your commitment to something greater than yourself. It is proof that you have chosen to live in alignment with your values, even when the world seems indifferent to them. And in this choice, you find not only the meaning of suffering but also the essence of what it means to be truly good.